everyone, we're going to get started. So this workshop, we're talking specifically about applications to the United Kingdom. Yesterday we did a workshop about the US. So today, United Kingdom. We separate them up here because even though they do have a lot in common in terms of the amount of preparation that has to go into the applications, there are a lot of differences as well. So in this one, we're going to go kind of through the preparation process, through the application process, and I'm going to introduce you a little bit to UCAS, which will be your best friend during the United Kingdom application process. It's a great search tool. It's where you're going to go do your application, and you're going to be logging into it all the way through until you get your offers and you're making your decision. So we have our contact information here. If you're applying to the United Kingdom, most of the students will come and talk to me. You're always welcome to talk to your own counselor with questions that you have, but eventually students generally make their way over to me to talk about things in a little bit more detail. I'm also the one you will be linking your application to when you start your application. So I'm somebody who can read through your application with you, check to see if there's any mistakes, make sure everything's done correctly. I can help upload your reference letter from your teacher and make sure that the application finally does get sent to UCAS. I'm Miss Tara, by the way. I should introduce myself. Okay, so we do have a workshop series here. So we had the info session, as I like to call it, the initial interest meeting last week. Today is a little bit more detailed. In a couple of weeks, we're going to do a presentation for both the United States and the United Kingdom about personal statements and essays, but we're talking a lot about the personal statement. The personal statement is a big part of the UK application. It has a big impact on your admission status with the university, so it's an important one to know how to do well. That workshop is going to have a lot of resources. So when I give out the handout, you're going to notice it's kind of thick, but a lot of it is resources coming directly from UCAS and directly from UK universities telling you what they're looking for. So I think you're also going to find it really helpful. Feel free to go on UCAS before that workshop though too, and to start looking around for some information. If you want to start writing your personal statement, absolutely. The workshop here is a great introduction, but it's also a great option to make sure that you're on the right track if you have already started. We also have an editing session about a month later, so October 19th. If you're working on a personal statement, you'd like some feedback and you want to come to that editing session, you're more than welcome to. If that date doesn't work for you, don't worry, however, you can always book an appointment with me and we can go over your personal statement together. One common thing that students oftentimes do is they'll email me the personal statement and then we'll book an appointment maybe 1 or 2 days later so we can talk about it. I like to have some time with that personal statement. I do spend a lot of time when I'm looking through them, just so that I can give you really detailed feedback rather than having to do like a quick read through while you're standing there. I won't be able to give you as much good information that way. And finally, we're going to repeat this workshop November 16th. So if you would like a refresher in November, feel free to come again. If you have friends that decide between now and then that they want to apply to the UK and you think that this workshop was helpful for you, tell them to come in November. So this is kind of an overview of what applying to university in the UK is like. So we're going to talk about preparation, UCAS, finding universities, reference letters, personal statements, completing application, important notes, replying, timeline, all that information here. So some steps here. This comes directly from UCAS. So your first step is to choose your course. In the UK, when they're talking about a course, it's kind of like when we talk about a program here. So law, biology, psychology, business. That's what they mean when they're saying course. Second step would be applying. And then third step would be starting your course. But obviously these are vague. There's a lot more steps for each one. So when we're talking about preparation, you're going to start by choosing courses and backups. So you want to make sure when you're choosing the program that you're interested in studying, you're not going to only choose universities that are way at the top of the requirements. So not everybody that needs a 95 plus. Many of you will be graduating in May or June, and even those of you who are graduating in December, you don't know exactly what your average is going to be right now. So when you're choosing universities, you want to make sure you choose a good range of choices. Not everybody really, really high, some in the middle, and some that are lower. And these lower ones are what we call backup choices. They're universities who are accepting at an average rate that is lower than what you currently have. The reason for that is, again, you can't predict exactly where your grades are going to go. So your average may stay the same, it may go up, but it may go down, and you want to make sure you're preparing for that just in case. You also want backup choices because in case your programs become more competitive than the universities were expecting, so maybe they got more applications than they normally do, sometimes the average requirements will go up. And so these backup choices that were initially lower than your current average might end up being pretty close to where your current average is now. It's just good planning. You want to check the requirements and the deadlines. So deadlines for the UK are pretty standard, so we'll go over those ones. But the requirements do vary university by university. So many of them are pretty good at giving you a general guideline of what they're looking for students studying in an Ontario high school. So they may say 80%, 85%, 90%. But keep in mind that if you're applying to a program that would be more competitive, let's say law or medicine, generally you can expect those basic requirements to be a bit higher. Always check for requirements like additional testing. So if you're applying to law, you may need to write the LNAT test. You may need to write it very, very soon. If you're applying to medicine, you may have to write the UK CAT test. It's kind of similar in the idea to an MCAT because it's an admission to medical school, but it's a completely different style of test that's meant to be written by high school students. But again, you'll likely have to register for that very, very soon. So the more you know about your requirements, you can make sure that you're planning everything out correctly. You can request a reference letter from a teacher. That's a good thing to start early as well. You want to give them plenty of time to do that. Write a personal statement, like I said, a very important part of the application. Without a strong personal statement, your chances of admission do go down. And you want to pass the English language test if that's going to be required of you. So in the UK, the most common one is IELTS, although there are many UK universities that also accept TOEFL if you have written a TOEFL. So make sure you're checking for your universities to see which test that they accept and what score they're looking for. Scores can range dramatically by program. So it could be anywhere from a 6.5 to a 7.5, depending on which program that you're choosing. If you're applying to medical school, make sure you're checking each of your university requirements. Oftentimes, they're going to be a little bit different than the general requirements for other programs in, let's say, the sciences. You may be required to take the UK CAT test. Like I said, UK CAT registration typically closes in September, so you have to investigate now. I was looking it up today, and I believe the online booking ends September 18th. And so if you are interested in the medical school, you're going to want to do the online booking today if possible, but as soon as possible. So UCAS is going to be your home when you're talking about UK applications. You're going to spend a lot of time on this website. When you're completing your UCAS application, you're going to have to fill out the following sections. So personal details, your choices, so that's your university choices. You have a maximum of 5. Your education, so that oftentimes they're going to want you to fill in detailed information about your education from about grade 10 up until now. And when I say detail, I mean oftentimes they're going to ask you to fill in every single class that you have taken from grade 10 until now, along with the completion dates and the final grades. So you may have to dig up some old report cards from your previous school in order to fill out this application. It's not very hard to do, but it is time consuming, so you want to make sure that you give yourself plenty of time to work on it. Any employment background you have, many of our students don't have that, so they leave this section mostly blank, but if you have had a part-time job when you were back home, you can definitely fill out the information here. Your personal statement, normally what students will do is they will work on the personal statement in a Word document, so they'll work on it separately, and then when it's ready to go, they'll copy and paste it into the UCAS application. After that, you just check for some quick formatting things, make sure your paragraphs didn't get too messed up or anything, and then you should be good to go. It's kind of hard to work on the personal statement in UCAS. It's not easy to save it and go back and make changes later. It's also basically just a text document, so it's not something that looks very pretty. So most students prefer to work on it in a separate document and then just copy and paste. And then your reference. We'll talk about references in a little bit more detail later on. One of the big things to note for references, though, is that your teachers don't need to print out the reference, sign it, put it on letterhead, make it look really pretty. All they need to do is email me with a copy of the reference in a Word document, or even in the body of the email. What I do is I copy and paste it directly into the application, similar to what you would do for the personal statement. So unfortunately, if your teacher sends me a PDF, I can't copy and paste it, so they might have to go and switch it over to a Word document, or I'll have to like type it out word by word. So just make their lives a little bit easier. They don't have to do all the fancy stuff, not at all. Just a Word document is perfectly fine. So they also are a great resource for researching UK university options. So you can do your searches here. You can make sure that you're finding universities that offer the course that you're interested in. They will link to the university websites where you can find more information about admission information and all that kind of stuff there. Deadlines are coming fast, especially for medical school, or if you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge. Those deadlines are October 15th. So just make sure you're starting that application now. If you're applying for other universities or other programs, you'll have a little bit more time, so you can spend more time with the research process. When you're starting your UCAS application, they're going to ask you for a buzzword. This is the CIC buzzword. This will link your application to me so that I can see your application, I can review it with you, and I can upload your reference. So when you're making choices, you can use the search function on UCAS. They have a lot of resources to help you find out what kind of study and career options are for you. It really depends on your personal preference. This is a great place to go if you really just have no idea. You're really at the beginning of your research phase. But it also will help once you've got a stronger idea of what program you're interested in. And again, always make sure you check your entry requirements. So, basic kind of timeline to give you an idea of what to expect. So towards the end of September, you want to be working on drafts of your personal statements, and you want the UCAS reference guideline given to the teachers by yourself. So you want to introduce the subject of a reference to your teacher, ask them if they would be willing to do it. They don't have to have it done by the end of September, that's fine. But you want to at least broach the subject with them and then follow up with them in a couple of weeks to make sure that this is something that they can do for you. October 15th, make sure you're working on UK time, not Canada time. That's something that kind of gets everyone. I always say, do it October 14th, and then you don't have to worry about the time difference. It's a UCAS deadline for medicine, dentistry, veterinary science, or if you're interested in applying to Oxford or Cambridge. So I want to be really clear here. This doesn't mean if you're applying to medicine at Oxford. This deadline means any program at Oxford or Cambridge, or medicine, dentistry, or veterinary science at any university. Okay, is that clear? Is anyone confused about that? This is a little bit of a weird thing. Okay. December 3rd is the CIC deadline for all other UCAS applications. So what I mean by the CIC deadline, really quick there, is I want to be able to review your application with you before we submit it to UCAS. So when you're done your application, right before you pay, come and see me and we can review, and that way if we catch any mistakes, you can make some changes. I do this early for two reasons. One, gives you plenty of time to make changes if you need to. This will also give you plenty of time to work out any payment issues. Sometimes your first method of payment isn't going to work. If you leave it to the last minute, it can be difficult to get the payment done in time. Number two, after this, exams happen. Then winter break happens. Then Christmas happens. Then New Year's. Then you come back to CIC, and then OUAC is due almost immediately. US applications if you're applying to the US. I want to make sure our focus can be on getting this application done and getting it done correctly. As soon as we get a little bit further into December, it can be very difficult for the two of us to connect. And so I like to just try to bypass all of that and make sure we're good. That doesn't mean once December 3rd happens, if you haven't done your application, then I'm just going to send you out to do it on your own. I will do my absolute best to review every application that comes through. But it does get more difficult. So I encourage students to try to get it done early, both for your benefit and to make sure that you don't run into any problems later on. Or if you do run into problems, we have time to fix them. January 15th is the UCAS deadline for equal consideration. So So that means even though the CIC deadline is December 3rd, the actual deadline is January 15th. The UK is pretty strict about their deadlines. If you miss this deadline, you will be very limited in the number of universities that would be willing to accept your application. Because this deadline is so strict, that's another reason why I put the December 3rd deadline so early. Applications received after the deadlines will still be forwarded to the universities and colleges, providing they have vacancies, but they are not obliged to consider them. So they don't have to look at your application if it's submitted after January 15th. All applications received up to a deadline will be guaranteed equal consideration by universities. So even if you submitted it in the last minute, as long as it was there on time, it will be considered equally with all of the other students. Following the deadline is up to the university if they wish to consider the application or not. I can't convince them to look at it if they don't want to. This is completely up to the university. Personal statements, a little bit of an overview. Obviously, we'll talk about this in more detail during the personal statement workshop, but this is just to kind of get you started. So a personal statement is your chance to promote yourself as an individual. You should include academic achievements, past and present. Don't go too far back. They're not really interested that you won the math award in grade 4. Obviously, you want to look for something relevant. So usually in the last 2 to 3 years is kind of what they're looking for. Why you're interested in the subject area. What drew you to business? What drew you to biology? There are lots of different subjects that you can choose. Why this one? You want to show your knowledge of the subject area. So you didn't just decide on a whim that you were going to apply to this one. You've done your research. You understand what's involved with studying this subject at the university level. You have some idea of what you want to do with this degree after you graduate. They want to see your enthusiasm to go beyond the syllabus. So this would be maybe some outside research that you're doing. Some things that you're doing outside of the classroom related to your program of choice that show that you're not just studying biology when you're in the classroom, that biology is something that you're interested outside of the classroom as well. What do you enjoy about studying? And details about your independent study skills. So studying is something that a lot of people say they do, but not everybody is that great at it. Studying is a skill that you develop over time. And it's something that you want to reflect about, because what worked for you 2 years ago may no longer work for you at all later on. I mean, I know when I was in high school, I have a pretty good memory, especially when it comes to dates. And so I was able to get by in history class pretty easily, just based on the fact that I had a good memory. When I started taking history classes when I went to university, that wasn't good enough anymore. And all of a sudden I had to take a really strong look at what I thought was, well, I must be really good at studying. I always do well in my high school courses. And realizing that, you know what, no. What I was doing before was relying on just something that, I just happen to be naturally good at. But now that that's no longer applying, I have to completely change the way I prepare for tests, the way I prepare for presentations. And with something that you have to put a lot of thought into, you have to try an option. And if it doesn't work, you try something else. And you keep trying something until something actually starts working. So studying is a skill that you develop, similarly to leadership skills or communication skills or organizational skills. Some people are just good at it right from the beginning, but most of us will have to work on it, and we'll have to change what we do throughout our time. And this is the kind of thought that the UK is looking for when they're asking about your student career. So keep in mind, you don't have to talk about all of these different things. Not everybody will have something profound or interesting to say about each one of these points. So you can choose the points that are of most interest to you. You may have things that are not on this list that you would really like to mention. You may have outside experience that you feel relates to your subject. You may have clubs, sports, volunteer work, all that good stuff that you really want to talk to them about because you feel like, in these activities you have developed really good communication and leadership skills. And that you're applying to business. And people in business need really good communication and leadership skills, and here's why. So don't feel limited by this. A personal statement is personal at its core. Every personal statement is run through a software to check for plagiarism, so don't try that. Just write your own. It's just easier that way. They're also much better. When you write from a personal experience, you can really tell. You can feel the excitement and the passion, what the students are talking about. If you're using somebody else's words, it never sounds as good, and it always sounds just off. It's not personal, so it's not a personal statement. The personal statement will be the same for all of your choices, so don't write it about somebody in particular. Like, oh, I really want to go to Cambridge. Well, I mean, University of Edinburgh is going to be kind of sad when they read that. So just make sure you keep it nice in general. If you're applying to multiple programs, make sure to mention all of the different programs as well. It can be a little tricky to do that, but if you're applying to, let's say, biology and medicine, you do want to talk about your interest in medicine, but you also want to talk about your interest in biology. So just keep in mind that everyone's reading the same personal statement. Max 4,000 characters. Characters, not words. Character means like individual letters and symbols and spaces and things like that. And a maximum of 47 lines. Minimum of 1,000 characters. Don't do 1,000. Try to get as close to 4,000 as you can. There's no spell checker, so you have to be really careful. Use the spell checker in your Word document and make sure that it's set to British English, not American English. So there's two different ways of spelling. So just make sure when you're using your Word document, you've got that set up. Most Word documents will have the default setting on US English and not British English. In your handout, we do kind of go over a few of the main differences between the two, but obviously we can't cover everything, so just make sure that you're checking that. And like I said, it's best to write and save it in a separate word processing window and copy and paste it to UCAS once you're complete. This website here will give you more information about how to do that. So, handout from the previous workshop has a little bit more information about personal statements. Even more will be coming next workshop. Reference letters. So you must ask your teacher if they can write you a reference letter. Your teacher should give the reference letter to your university placement counselor. You don't get to see it, okay? So it's secret from you. The teacher should be somebody who teaches a senior level subject, preferably related to what you're applying for, although it doesn't necessarily have to be. You want somebody who knows you well. You cannot submit your application until your reference letter has been successfully uploaded by your counselor. So unfortunately, it is something that you might have to kind of keep reminding your teacher to hand in to me. Because you are kind of stuck until that part is done. So give your teachers the following information. We have a good handout in UPO that you could give to your teachers as well, but we're actually planning on emailing it out to all the teachers so that they got an idea of what to do for the reference letters. So requesting a reference letter. One, you have to ask them. Of course you have to ask them. Don't just assume, but you have to ask. I cannot ask for you. This is something that you are going to have to do by yourself. Probably 1 to 2 months in advance. This gives them time to write the reference letter. Keep in mind though, again, we have until December 3rd, so this does give you some time. You don't necessarily have to ask, write me a reference letter tomorrow. You can introduce the subject, but say, you know what, I know we don't know each other too well right now. I've only just begun your class. I don't need the reference letter right away, but if you'd be willing to think about it, could I talk to you again in maybe 2 weeks, ask you whether or not you're okay with it? And if they are, again, give them another month to complete it. This will give them more time to get to know you in the classroom. What kind of student are you? How well do you work with others? Do you raise your hand and talk a lot in class? Are you handing your assignments in on time? Are you getting to class on time? All this kind of stuff goes into what the teacher is going to be writing about you and your suitability not only as a student right now, but your suitability for the program that you're interested in. Connect with your teacher again after 2 weeks as a reminder, and make sure to thank your teacher for taking the time to write your reference letter. This is something that they're doing outside of their normal teacher duties, so this is something that they are doing specially for you. If your teacher declines to write a reference, don't worry about it. It's usually that they don't have enough time. So they may have a lot of other duties that they have to complete as a teacher, and they know that they can't devote the amount of time that's required to write a good reference letter. So no teacher wants to write you an okay one. If they do it, they want to do a good job. And if they're being honest with themselves, sometimes they just can't devote that time. So don't get upset, don't take it personally. Usually they're actually trying to help you. They also may not know you well enough to write you a strong recommendation, so it might be a good idea to ask another teacher. But if you are having trouble, you've talked to a few teachers, you're not getting a lot of response back, make sure you come and talk with your university placement counselor so that we can try to help. So this is what UCAS looks like. You will be creating your username and your password so that you can create your account. You can do this at any time. I believe today is actually when the application opens. It's something that is not a bad idea. This does take a while to complete. So oftentimes students will start the application early so that they can do like little bits at a time. So it's not one that you just sit down and do the entire application. It's very time consuming. So usually students will do a few different sections, take a break, come back and do a few more, maybe a few days later. So we have some application notes and some terms explained in your handout. The UK has a lot of terms you will not be familiar with. They have just a very different education system than we do here in Canada. So we kind of gave you a bit of a dictionary to give you an idea of what to expect. After you pay and send, you're not done. I actually prefer that students come and talk to me before they pay, but I can review the application after you pay as well. It's sent to me once you pay. It's not sent directly to UCAS. We then have another talk, make sure nothing wants to be changed, and then I can submit it to UCAS. It's a little bit difficult to make changes once I've done that submission process, so that's why we have a lot of conversations right towards the end. I just want to make sure that no changes need to be made. If you're applying for programs that have a UCAS deadline of October 15th, come and see me as soon as you can, okay? I can still definitely help you with that, but it's something that we want to get working on as soon as possible. After you apply, you're going to track your application. So track is on the UCAS online system, and it allows you to follow the progress of your application once it's been submitted. Oftentimes the universities will also email you with information. They're really good to communicate with to make sure that you're clear on everything that you need to do. It will show your choices, offers, and personal details. You can update these details later on. Not a lot of information can be updated, but some of the personal stuff can. It gives you 24/7 access via password. You can reply to offers online, and you can also use this system for extra clearing and adjustment. So we talk about these in a little bit more detail in your terms, but essentially towards the end of the application process, if your offers are not what you were hoping for, they offer these extra clearing and adjustment options in case all of your universities said no. You can have another chance to add a sixth one. If you actually did a lot better than what you were expecting, you can check to see if anybody is accepting applications at a little bit more of a competitive university. So because you are limited to 5 choices, UCAS does offer you some of these options later on in the process in case those 5 didn't quite work out. So when you start receiving offers, probably March to May, but that's a very vague guideline. It can really come at any time, but that's probably the most popular time. An admissions tutor, so that is the person who is making the decision about your application. They can make one of the following decisions. An unconditional offer is an offer with no conditions. You're definitely accepted, everything's fine. A conditional offer is an offer, but to be accepted, you'll need to meet conditions. So they're usually related to your final grades. They can be very specific. I have had students in the past who were asked to get, let's say, an 85% average overall and a minimum of 83 in all 6 of their grade 12 courses. And I have had students who have met that 85% overall, but one of their courses happened to be 80%. Because they did not meet their conditions, they were not able to accept their offer. So it's really important that you read these conditions very, very carefully so that you understand each one. There is also sometimes a condition for you to do additional testing, but we'll have to kind of take that case by case. And then you could also be unsuccessful. So your application is denied or you haven't met the conditions of a conditional offer. So it is possible for universities to offer you an alternative course as well. So if you don't meet the requirements for the program that you apply to, but you do meet the requirements for something else, it's possible they may offer you that. They may ask for an interview. They may ask to see your portfolio if you're applying for a design-based program. Or they may ask you to take an admissions test. I had a student a few years ago who had to take a specific kind of math test. It's called a STEP test. And she just had to take that as part of her admissions criteria and conditions for her university application. She had to get a certain grade on a test. Replying to offers. Once all of your universities have made a decision, the maximum of 2 offers may be held. So you have 3 options when you get offers. Your firm acceptance is your first choice. Your insurance acceptance is an offer you accept as your second choice, just in case you don't meet the entry requirements from your firm offer. So if your firm offer is saying all of your grades 12 courses must have a final mark of 83 or higher, and you're like, well, I'm not done my grade 12 courses yet. So I'm really happy to have an offer to this university, but I'm really not sure if I'm going to be able to meet these conditions. You can accept that university as your firm choice, and that way if you meet the conditions, you can go. But you can also accept another university as your insurance choice, your second choice. And that university should be one that has, slightly more flexible conditions that you are sure that you're going to meet. This is a very unique system. I've never seen anywhere else where you can do this, where you can have 2 offers at the same time. Or you can choose to decline the offer. So, in order to connect your application to me, you have to write the buzzword exactly as shown. Like I said, you're going to have to list a mark or a final grade for all of your courses since grade 10. And you're going to have to list all of your current courses here at CIC and your future courses. I entered the center code here. Don't worry too much about that one. You can just search Columbia International College and we will pop up. Fraud verification, just be honest on your application. They do a very good job of checking for fraud in the UK. They will catch people who do that. Predicted grades. Most universities will ask for your predicted grades. So you're doing your application, let's say in January, and then they're going to ask your teacher, well, what will their final mark be in May? You just started the course. Your teacher has no idea what your final mark is going to be. This is a big difference in the UK and the Canadian system. It's quite difficult for teachers to make that prediction right then. So you can check in with each of your universities and explain how courses work in Ontario. However, they're almost always going to need some kind of explanation letter. So tell your UPO counselor, and we will contact the university on your behalf. So usually we'll have to kind of give them something in the way of predicted grades, but explain that the way that we do things here, it's just not really something that's easy to do. So a quick look into extra clearing and adjustment. So again, these would be after you have done your application and after you have started getting your grades and you've got a better idea of your admission chances. If you used all of your 5 choices and have no offers, or you've declined all your offers, you could use extra for consideration at one time. Clearing, if you have no offers and have not met the conditions of an offer, you can have a second chance. So clearing allows you to apply for courses that still have vacancies, even if you've used up all your 5 options. And adjustment, if you're getting better results than the conditional offer you hold, you could apply for a different course or university. So, UCAS is going to be where you're going to spend a lot of time. So I think it's a good idea, if you're really serious about applying for the UK, log into UCAS, make an account, connect your account to CIC, and just start that process. In September, if your deadline is January, in September I would focus on choosing your universities, narrowing down your choices, and make sure that you're reviewing the admission requirements and applying to a good range of choices, especially if you're primarily interested in the UK. Some of our students are complementing their UK university applications with Canadian university applications, and then take a look at them as a whole to make sure you have backups for both the UK and for Canada. But if you're primarily interested in the UK, then you absolutely want to make sure that you're choosing those universities very carefully. So in September, that's kind of your goal. You can definitely come see me throughout October and November as you're working on your application, as you're working on your personal statement, to just make sure everything's looking good that way, aiming for that December 3rd deadline. If you're applying for a program or a university that has the October 15th deadline, come see me now, okay? So tomorrow or the next day, come to UPO, book an appointment with me, and we'll make sure that we have a conversation, hopefully sometime next week, so that we're clear. You want to be choosing your universities as soon as possible. You want to be looking at those admission requirements, because if you have to write a test, or if you have to do any additional information outside of CIC, you're going to want to do that right away. And then you're going to want to be registering on UCAS, logging in, getting this application done as soon as you can. Okay, so I just want to stress the importance of that. Otherwise, I will see you all in a couple of weeks for the personal statement workshop. And if you do have any questions, feel free to come up and ask. Thank you. Thank you.